Cool. All right, you guys. Let's do this. I have put everyone on mute at this point. So, hi, I'm Brian Gresko. Welcome to the Antibody, which is a quarantine reading series coming to you on LitHub's virtual book channel. I hope that everyone out there has been taking care of themselves. It's been intense. It continues to be intense. I got up early this morning with all intentions of writing before my family woke up, only to have my 10-year-old, soon to be 11-year-old, come barreling into the bed to cuddle. At which point I put aside my plans for writing and just decided to kind of be there in that moment with him and just kind of be a body. Of course, we are disembodied tonight, but it's always wonderful to see all of your names and to see, if your camera's on, to see you out there and feel your energy. And I'm really excited about that, and really excited because we have three authors with us tonight whose work I love so much and admire so much. And that's Laura Vandenberg is here, and Melissa Febos is here, and Tracy O'Neill as well. So as I do at the start of all of these, I just remember to treat yourself kind, get a snack, get a drink, take a deep breath, settle your body in to enjoy their artistry. If you've been with us before, and I know a lot of you have, welcome back. If you're new, this is how this works. For now, your microphones are on mute, and I ask that you please keep them that way. We don't have a stage, but we do have a microphone, and so we're going to honor the authors when they have the microphone as they read for us for a little bit. And at the end of the event, there will be time for a Q&A, so get ready for that. But the chat is public so that you can show your love and appreciation of the authors, and I ask that you do. So please, get your keys clacking, get your fingers tapping, and please welcome our first author, Melissa Febos, who's joining us from, hi, Melissa. Melissa is joining us from Brooklyn, I believe. I'm unmuting you, Melissa.
I unmuted me too, so I stayed muted. Hi. Yeah, I'm in Brooklyn.
Joining us from Brooklyn.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, welcome. No, I got your.
I'm so happy.
Oh, it's okay. This is the common problem with the Zoom. It doesn't handle over speaking very well. I'm sorry. Let's rewind. Melissa Febos is here, and Melissa Febos is I'm gonna read your bio for the audience here. Melissa Febos is the author of the memoir Whip Smart and an amazing essay collection, Abandon Me, which was a Lambda Literary Award finalist, a Publishing Triangle Award finalist, and an Indie Next pick, and was widely named Best Book of 2017. Her third book, Girlhood, an illustrated essay collection, is forthcoming in March of 2021 from Bloomsbury. In 2018, Melissa Febos was the recipient of the Jean Cordova Nonfiction Award from Lambda Literary and the Sarah Verdon Writing Award from the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council. She has been awarded fellowships and prizes from the MacDowell Colony, Red Loaf Writers Conference, Virginia Center for Creative Arts, Vermont Studio Center, the Barbara Deeming Memorial Foundation, the BAU Institute, Ragdale, Prairie Schooner, and others. Her essays have recently appeared in Tin House, Granta, McSweeney's, The Believer, the Swanee Review, and the New York Times. She is an associate professor at the University of Iowa, where she teaches in the nonfiction writing program, and she's joining us tonight from Brooklyn. And now, Melissa, I'm going to shut up. The microphone is yours. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Brian. You're always such a great and generous host, and I'm so happy to be here. This reading feels like a celebration of both Tracy and Laura's new books, which I am very excited to read and to hear from tonight. So I'm not going to read from the book that I have coming out early next year because I just handed it in, and it's like I've been reading it and reading it and reading it for so long, and I've been working on some newer stuff. That's also a little bit more fun in some ways. So I think I'm going to read something that's newer. And this is an excerpt. It's called The Dry Season, and it takes place in summer 2016, and it's organized like kind of a journal or a log. You're going to have to acknowledge the ridiculousness of making such a big deal out of 3 months of no sex, my mother reminds me, unnecessarily. There are people who, I know, I tell her, of course I know that. Amy and I meet at the cafe in Bedford to work together. After a few hours typing on our laptops at adjacent tables, we break for lunch. Over our exorbitantly priced grain bowls, I explain to her that I'm going to spend 90 days celibate. Amy has been single for 3 years. She finishes chewing her mouthful of greens and swallows. Oh, you're going to give up sex for 3 whole months. She laughs richly like a villain in a children's cartoon and then concludes, fuck you. There are different kinds of celibacy. In the 13th through 16th centuries, the Beguines were religious orders of women in monastic communes called béguinage, with their own self-designated rules. They lived among the poor and worked in service. The Beguines were celibate and unmarried, but they took no vows, did not give up their property, and could leave the order at any time. They traveled, preached, and lived more freely than most any women in the world. For years, I had a glittery bumper sticker on my old car that said in voluptuous font, "Don't quit, surrender," one of the more sanctimonious 12-step slogans. My ex-girlfriend and I put it there for laughs, but over the years, my reading of it became increasingly earnest, especially after we broke up. Don't you think you should take a break? My mother asked me when I was 32. I had just ended a 3-year relationship. I had not been single since my first relationship at 15. I had been preoccupied with one person or another since I was 11 years old. Probably, I said, though I had already begun the next one. Giving up an abusive lover can be harder than giving up a drug, I found 2 years later. When I finally did, I thought, you should take a break. Then I got into another relationship, then another, then another, then another, then another. After each one, I thought I should definitely take a break. The Beguines didn't quit sex. They quit lives that held men at the center. They gave up sex as the cost of that freedom. Surely it was no sacrifice for some. Some must have dropped it like an anvil. To put God at the center of their lives required freedom from men. It meant putting themselves and each other at the center. Even men who claim to put God at the center of their own lives want women to put men at the center of theirs. I have quit many things. When I was younger, I was always leaving. I never even told some jobs that I'd quit. I just stopped showing up and never walked down that street again. Once, I quit a man that way. This kind of quitting eventually shrunk my world to a thimble, but a thimble is still big enough to drink from. It seems unfair to call an addiction the attachment one has been encouraging one's whole life. Though what is unfair is not necessarily untrue. I could blame patriarchy for almost everything and be righteous. At a certain point, the issue isn't whose fault it is, but how to get free. The male monks, unlike the Beguines, could not live among the poor or anyone and remain celibate. Even cloistered away in hair shirts, they took to raping female donkeys and molesting other monks. For them, celibacy was a punishment, a great deprivation, a war with themselves. They had no freedom to gain, only freedom to lose. I suppose that's what world dominance will get you. Having nothing left to gain can be a vulnerable position, though not one for which I have much sympathy. My position is not one for which all will have sympathy either. Not my friend Amy, nor most of my exes. I've been thinking about my exes because I am making a comprehensive list of them to review during my celibacy. It is a sobering exercise, the list of my mistakes tedious in its repetition. I'm interested in making different mistakes. Barth wrote in A Lover's Discourse, "Throughout life, all of love's failures resemble one another, and with reason, they all proceed from the same flaw. In my case, I suspect it is more than one flaw, though if I can correct the one, it will be a happy miracle." The miracles of women are often more labor than magic, I've discovered. St. Catherine of Siena drank the pus of the dying and starved herself half to death for most of her life. Her reward was exemption from marriage and the liberty to preach like a man. She mockingly referred to the Pope as daddy and scolded him publicly. By the time she actually starved herself to death, she was one of Italy's leading ecclesiastical authorities and statesmen. Historically, at least, celibacy has often been the bedrock upon which our sovereignty is built. The thought occurs to me that I've actually been celibate for a few weeks before my official start date. I wonder if I can prorate that time and subtract it from my 90 days. I suspect that the last man I dated was the last man I will ever have dated in my lifetime, a title he may or may not appreciate holding. He was in town for the weekend, an old college friend. When I called another friend to complain about a bad date with a woman, she told me to call him. Call him, have him come fuck you, she said. It'll make you feel better. This was unlike me in every way. I've never enjoyed casual sex. How did they do it? The ones who make love without love, writes Sharon Olds. These are the true religious, the purists, the pros. Why not? I thought, I'll try something different. It was just okay, though I did feel better in the morning. After he went back to California, he started writing me letters. He wrote me a letter every day for the next 6 months. While in a sanatorium for his tuberculosis, Barth fell in love with another patient. Though the man was straight, Barth wrote him letters every day for 6 months. I do not think that the letters convinced the man to love Barth, though the ones sent by my old college friend did the trick. He was a very good writer of letters. That, combined with the 4,000 miles between us, was a powerful aphrodisiac. After we'd been dating for some months, the man asked me why I'd never introduced him to any of my friends. Are you ashamed to be dating a man? He said. Yes, I said. While we were together, I fantasized about having a baby almost constantly. I was 34. I'm fairly certain at this point that I won't ever have children. And when I think of our sex, I think of it as the last gasp of my biological imperative. That man would have been a good father, I thought. But whenever we spent more than one day together, I couldn't wait to get away from him. His need for my attention emitted a very high-pitched whine, like a mosquito audible only to me. When I broke up with him, he told me I was making a colossal mistake. Sometimes I roll the phrase around in my mouth like a lozenge, a colossal mistake. Last summer, I intended to take a break. I had just broken up with the man, a colossal mistake, and went to a residency in Vermont. I told my friends that I was planning on taking a sexual sabbatical. I brought an ugly pair of clogs to the residency, as if they were a prophylactic. For the first week, I wore the clogs daily to yoga classes. I woke up to work at 6 a.m. I walked in the woods and abstained from the freshly baked bread that they served at every single meal. Then I began an affair with a sculptor. She was 25 years old. Such a thing would have been inconceivable at any earlier point in my life. I had exclusively dated people older than me. I was not dating the 25-year-old, I said, mostly to myself. Then I started eating the bread. Soon I was eating hardly anything but the bread, great slabs of it slathered in salted butter. I started smoking cigarettes with the 25-year-old and sleeping until 11. I never wore the clogs again. I often think about that particular definition of compulsion, an act meant to relieve a mental obsession. The book party is in Tribeca, and it's the kind that's held in a private apartment whose owner is unclear, though what is clear is that they are very rich. On the way there, my body hums with a summery kind of excitement. I associate summer in New York with smoking, iced coffee, and sexual intrigue. The Callery pear trees, Pyrus Caleriana, on my block smell like semen, and though I am not interested in semen associated here, it becomes increasingly clear when other people are on the make. I have always been able to tell when someone is interested, but now I can tell whether I'm interested or not. It says my connection just got unstable. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. I just have like one more paragraph. The editor does not smell like ammonia, but expensive. Oh no. The Pyrus Caleriana, what is known pollinating insects, which apparently are compelled by the scent of ammonia, which is also found in semen. The editor doesn't smell like ammonia, but expensive cologne, and she is not across the room, but leaning on her elbow right next to me. Her gaze looks at me and through me at the same time. When I'm not hypnotized by the high inside of it with them, it is so clearly impersonal. A person in that state of intrigue or ecstasis is no more in love with their subject than a wolf is in love with a rabbit. It's a really big garbage truck going by. I don't know if you could hear it. This is the last sentence. A person in that state of intrigue or ecstasis is no more in love with their subject than a wolf in love with a rabbit, a grouse with an acorn, a junkie with a musty taste at the back of her throat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much, everyone in the chat. Get those fingers going. Show some love for Melissa Febos. That was amazing. I gotta tell you two things though, like jumped right out at me. One is that every spring, my wife and I are always kind of the smell of the calorie pears. Okay, I'm glad that that's like a thing because right, I was always kind of like we just thought maybe it was us. But then the other thing is the Barths that you mentioned. I can't go back and like look at my old Barth texts because I've like underlined them, circled them, and written the most embarrassing like 20 to 25-year-old notes in there. I just need to like save them for posterity, but get all new
get a new copy. I know. He speaks to that part of us. He really does.
Right? It's amazing. Very cool. Thank you so much. You guys, I have partnered with Greenlight Bookstore to provide copies of our authors' books. You cannot get a copy of Girlhood till next year, but Abandon Me is amazing, and there are copies available at Greenlight Bookstore. And they will ship those to you, or you can download them if you are a digital reader, if that's your thing. So please check them out. Support our local bookstores, our independent bookstores. Sorry, local for me, independent for everybody. Support our authors. I'm also putting up here Melissa's Twitter handle. If you are online on Twitter, connect with her that way, and show her some support. Cool, moving right along. Our next reader is Tracy O'Neill. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. All right, Tracy O'Neill. Tracy O'Neill is the author of The Hopeful, one of electric literature's best novels of 2015, and her new novel, Quotients. In 2015, she was named a National Book Foundation 5 Under 35 honoree. She was longlisted for the Flaherty Dunnan Prize and was a Narrative Under 30 finalist. In 2012, she was awarded the Center for Fiction's Emerging Writers Fellowship, and her writing has appeared in Granta, Rolling Stone, The Atlantic, The New Yorker, and numerous other publications. Today, actually, Tracy published a beautiful and amazing essay on Catapult that you should all check out if you haven't already. And she attended the MFA program at the City College of New York and the PhD program in communications at Columbia University. Please get those fingers tapping and show some love to Tracy O'Neill. The microphone is yours. I muted myself too soon. That's how excited I am. You got it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me, Brian and Melissa. That was great. And congratulations, Melissa, also on the new job at Iowa. They're so lucky to have you. Okay, so this is such a weird book to read from because there's a lot of information that needs to be kept in mind. So I'm just going to give a little bit of information for leading into this chapter. So Jeremy, who is one of the main characters, whose last name is Allsworth, his real last name is Allsworth, is a former intelligence operative, and he has just received a text message from Wright, who is also a former intelligence operative. So I'm going to read 2 chapters, but they're very short. Chapter 7. He thought about Wright's message, month of Fools, 92. He thought about it and knew there was nothing good to come of it. The last time he had believed any good could come of Northern Ireland was 1991. When Jeremy landed in Lisburn that year, they gave him a name to follow, Gunner, in retrospect, a poor alias, facile. He arrived to Jeremy as paper before flesh, a file, text, date of birth, criminal record, address. He was a Belfast arms liaison, moving lethal technologies to the Republicans, gas-operated guns from Estonian radicals, the pure sweetheart special, M16s. Then the British had caught him with a shipment of Degtyaryov bullets powerful enough to leave a victim looking exploded instead of shot. On capture, they told him silence was the sound after a dead child hit the earth. Your boy is old enough to know fear, they said. Your boy with the condition. Secrets for the boy, they said. and it had been easy to turn him because the mother of the child was 18 months in the grave. The first time he met Gunnar, Jeremy stood in the basement of a fish shop in Shaftesbury, the smell of sea flesh clinging. There were boxes everywhere, an agony of newsprint. In an icebox, black fish eyes stared over gaping mouths. You could see the moment of recognition, the startled look that would stay forever. He slipped ice chips in his hands to clean them of rubbish. Gunnar had selected a crate stacked over a pile of collapsed cardboard cartons, plunked down, and Gunnar had brushed the metal wheel of a lighter with his thumb so that small blue flames hiccuped in his hand. Got a clinker seat for the show. Will you not take one too? I prefer to stand, Jeremy said, but something about Gunnar's smile made him feel foolish. Jeremy had not expected Gunnar to be so boyish. The photograph in his pocket that day, small and grayscale, showed only a compromised head against cheap paint. Like making it hard on yourself, do you, Ellsworth? We've got business to attend to, Jeremy said. Protestant work ethic will fetch you supper, but it won't win you time to eating. I'm not a Protestant, he said, flesh running up his neck, or a Catholic for that matter. Everyone needs someone to pray to, Ellsworth, even the English, Gunnar said. Jeremy had not known what to make of the man. He had groped for the tongue of someone in such a position. He had thought of what someone else, someone who did not turn red as jam, would say. You talk a lot for a tout, he said. A freezer groaned in the corner. I suppose that's what touts do. Now, many years removed, Jeremy remembered how that one word had knocked off patina, and Jeremy remembered how when Gunnar had finished snitching, he stood face wrung out. Gunnar had rubbed his thighs, straightened. He had a way of inviting looks with casual vigor. Jeremy remembered thinking it was a poor quality for a man with secrets, and Jeremy remembered the thought to touch his hand. They had not shaken on meeting, but his own swampy palm remained in his pocket. Did not extend to the informant, the trainers had advised. He will swallow kilometers. That afternoon, Gunnar crossed the room. He paused at the door out of the shop basement, turned back abruptly so that the upstairs light bristled around him. Cecil's his name, Gunnar said. My boy. I know, Jeremy said. And he'll not be harmed now? I'll make contact again soon, said Jeremy. Already he's company. I burn a toast and he shouts, own goal. You're proud. Don't have one of your own, so, Gunnar said. Jeremy bent down to lace his shoe. You're not a bad man, Ellsworth, but are you decent? Jeremy stood again. Who would believe whoever it is a person claims to be? I'm original, but not creative, Ellsworth. I won't lie to you. You already did. The boy isn't speaking yet. The specialists say he's nonverbal autistic. Gunnar shrugged. I figured you for pitiless, but I thought you might be charmed. In that moment, a prickle began. Perhaps not yet the knowledge that nothing good could come of Northern Ireland, but some consciousness of how little he knew. He would not until then have known the inertia of divisions, nor would he have known that one day he would go around his home, turning lights off, Alexandra already dunked under sleep, that looking at her, he would want to blot out the information of his life until she'd arrived in it. Chapter 8. He did not know what to say, so he said there was nothing to tell. He did not say that he'd forgotten facts were less dense than all the thick fictions, that facts pushed against the surface, bobbing. It was the night before she was to leave for New York, and now she was circling on what he could not say. It's just, you never said you were in the army, she said. I haven't known you all that long, he said, whereas I am very old. The math of it is skewed. So catch me up, old man, she said, bright and campy, with something. She'd ceased eating. He reached across the table for a crumple of lettuce and tried to think up a quip about how she was allowing her salad to get cold. They had gotten to the moment because she liked war movies, not cowboy movies. They had gotten to the moment because he'd burned the roast. They had gotten to the moment because he'd wanted them to have a very nice dinner before she left town, and they had been having a very nice dinner. He saw her glance at his hand, holding an oily green. I was in the army at the end of the 80s, in Germany, and I went home. Alexandra made her face dramatic, ironic. Did you kill anyone? Jeremy cut into his steak carefully. He finished chewing, said, I drank like a young man for a while, and it made an old man of me. I used to have a hairline in the proper place, you know. Jeremy searched for more true things to say. This meant stick to Germany. In Teufelsberg, translation, Devil's Mountain, the air then was Dylan and Class and Fiend radio, Bitlovka jackets, and the class enemy who comes in the night. By the time he had arrived, old ladies across the wall were watching Dallas. He'd been 18 and buoyant with army money, a fortune compared to the sums available in the gray mines at home. The Siggies had 3 days to the week off, and so when he was not listening on the radio for words that meant war games, he'd read E.T.A. Hoffmann or left Field Station Berlin to buy champagne for young Germans who sang songs about the state where hop and malt did not lose. The final days of the Cold War arranged themselves like a holiday, and whether it was Schabowski's mistake or his stratagem, what everyone accepted was a few words and the war was over. That's what you did in the army? Alexandra dangled her fork over her plate. You read stories and sang songs? He raised an eyebrow. Why do you think I've got dirty little secrets? I don't entirely, but I want it all, she said. Don't you? He thought of how he loved that she couldn't sleep without music playing on the stereo, how because of that, sometimes he'd wake in the middle of the night to balk. She had never known her father, but she said because he'd owned a grocery, she thought of him when she saw a misty globe of lettuce. She was quietest in mornings. She left vitamins on Jeremy's toast plates, and simply he thrilled to look at her clavicle, her cheek. No, he said, I don't. I like you just the way you are. Alexandra's mouth drew into a wry little bow. And what if there is more? Is there? He said. He set his knife down, his fork. He lay both hands flat on the surface of the table, steady, symmetrical, one side of him, the other, heart, skin. I used to have secrets. I was a 15-year-old with a 40-year-old boyfriend. You nearly still do, he said. Her hands were brisk on a cloth napkin, folding it, setting it on the table. Done. Alexandra wobbled a glass of wine, circling it on its base. He could see she was a little drunk. Did you ever think of one thing, she said. Did you ever think if you could only fix that one thing, you would fix it all? Once, he said, for a few years. And then, she said, and then I grew up. My friend Lyle Michaels, she said, the journalist. The journalist, she said. Lyle says, when you learn someone's secret, that's when you really know them. Jeremy swallowed. Jeremy raised a finger. It is my turn for a question, he said. Tiramisu or flan?
Thank you so much, Tracy. Everyone show Tracy some love. That was awesome. And also now has me hungry for all the desserts that I do not have access to at this point. Very cool. Thank you so much, Tracy. And I like how you've got your setup with your book displayed prominently behind you. Nicely. Yes, very, very cool. I'm putting a link here in the chat to get a copy of Tracy O'Neill's new novel, Quotients, from Greenlight. I'm going to put Tracy's Twitter handle in here as well. If you're online, go find her. If I learn how to do the cut and paste, there we go. Very cool. Thank you so much, Tracy. Where are we? I'm sorry, you guys. You know what the difference is for me? This time around, I'm using a PC instead of my Mac. My Mac can't handle Zoom anymore. It's just too old. And I'm a Mac guy. I know that says something about me probably, but so I'm still trying to figure out how to do the whole setup here. So thanks for bearing with me. Thank you, Tracy, again. Moving right along.
Hey, nice eyeliner.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but we're matching.
Yes, yes. You know, soon enough we will be able to hit the dance floor, I hope, and break it down, eyeliner and all. Yeah, these events are a highlight for me to put on some nice clothes and some war paint. Cool. All right, moving right along. Our final reader of the evening is Laura Vandenberg. Laura is the author of the story collections What the World Will Look Like When All the Water Leaves Us, The Isle of Youth, and her forthcoming one, I Hold a Wolf by the Ears. She's also the author of the novels Find Me and The Third Hotel, which was a finalist for the New York Public Library Young Lions Fiction Award and an Indie Next Pick, and was named the best book of 2017 by more than a dozen publications. Laura is the recipient of a Rosenthal Family Foundation Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the Bard Fiction Prize, a Penn O. Henry Award, and a MacDowell Colony Fellowship, and is a two-time finalist for the Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award. Born and raised in Florida, I think I got this from your website. Laura, welcome. Where are you joining us from?
I'm in Florida.
You're in Florida. Cool.
Yes,
welcome.
I'm in Florida.
Everyone show Laura some love. Laura.
Hi, everyone.
The mic is yours.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for putting this series together and including me. And I'm super excited to be reading with Melissa and Tracy. I'm big fans, and your readings were amazing. I'm going to read a story from my collection that's coming out in July. I Hold a Wolf by the Ears. Since I am in Florida right now, I thought I would read from one of the Florida stories in the collection. And this story is called The Pitch. And I'm just going to read the first two sections. In the childhood photo my husband showed me, I noticed something strange. He had found the photo in a wood crate filled with his father's things. We had driven several such crates home with us after the funeral in Lake City 2 weeks earlier. In the picture, my husband was standing in the woods, shirtless and barefoot, and holding a fishing rod. 13 years old, slender and pale, a streak of mud on his cheek, one of his father's two big belts knotted around his waist, Americana all the way. My husband's mother, I had been told, died in childbirth. When we first met, he had a nasty habit of leaving his dirty socks on the bathroom floor. And when I'd asked him, were you raised in the woods or what? He had replied, as a matter of fact, I was. The woods in the photo were called The Pitch because the tree cover was so dense, not even the fabled Florida sunshine could blunt the shadows. The first time my husband mentioned these woods, reachable on foot from his childhood home in North Florida, I'd asked him if the name had something to do with baseball, and he'd said, no, like pitch dark. And then I'd said, as in Renata Adler, and he'd looked at me like I was hopeless. We went to the pitch once and walked around in there back when my husband's father was dying, but not yet dead. And I'd wondered who was in charge of naming things, how such decisions were made. I was fond of my father-in-law and had felt very sorry when he announced to us that he was dying, and remained sorry even after he began to flood my voicemail with messages left in the middle of the night in the last month of his life. During this time, I had tried to engage my husband on the subject of his impending orphanhood, but he refused. Instead, he spent his free hours cultivating his rose garden, examining the teas for signs of distress, and pruning his floribundas. He ordered expensive mulches online and frequented a nearby slaughterhouse for fresh manure. From the window of my backyard studio, I had observed him bending over the wide faces of the floribundas, whispering to them. Clearly, he regarded the roses as superior confidants. Yet I can't say that I was thinking about any of this when my husband showed me the photo. I was too busy looking at the boy in the background, small and white as milk, and shimmying up a tree. "Who's that?" I asked my husband, pressing my thumb over the boy's head. We were standing in my studio just under a small skylight. All day I had been at work on an illustration project commissioned by a wealthy eccentric. He snatched the photo from me. "What do you mean, who? That's me, the man you married." "Not you," I said, already exasperated. One unfortunate side effect of marriage was knowing the mistakes a person was going to make before they actually made them. I stood beside him and pointed at the boy in the tree. He held the photo close to his face. He blinked like he had something in his eye. Had he really not noticed the boy until this very moment? It was summer, which meant everyone walked around looking like they'd just been sprayed with a hose. And yet, when I touched my husband's arm, his skin was cool and dry. "I see what you're seeing," he began to nod. "I didn't before, but now I do." He explained that the boy was not a boy at all, but rather a large vine wrapped around the tree trunk, bleached and distorted by exposure. He pushed the photo under my nose. "Whatever you say." I returned to my desk, pressed a pencil to my sketch pad. I could feel my husband hovering over me, could hear him saying my name, but I did not look up, not if he was going to insist that I had mistaken a vine for a boy. That may have been the story he was intent on telling himself, but I wasn't about to let it infect me. I didn't yet understand that refusing one kind of narrative could activate another. "You draw one line and then you draw another," I told myself until I heard the studio door open and close, felt the air settle. The next thing I knew, it was dusk, and I was standing by the window at a momentary loss for how to proceed with the next phase of my illustration project, and my husband was in the backyard with a grill light and a shovel. I watched him set the photograph on fire and then bury the ashes in the ground, a safe distance from the roses. After the incident with the photo, my husband's every movement adopted an aura of menace. I would look up from my desk and see his face pressed to the window of my studio, or turn from the kitchen sink and find him right behind me in socked feet, perched on tiptoe like a gargoyle. He put his father's things on a high shelf in the garage, too high for me to reach, especially now that our ladder seemed to have gone missing. My husband worked as a receptionist for a psychiatrist, Dr. X, and began coming home late. From bed, I would hear the car rumble into the driveway, and once he was beside me, I would, somewhat against my will, fall into a sleep so deep it was like being absorbed into a black hole, though I couldn't say that I ever felt at rest. My husband continued to spend all his free time fussing over his roses. He started wearing his green gardening gloves indoors, leaving dirt trails on counters and side tables, charting his path through the house. When he was around, he pestered me with strange questions. "Have you been checked for cataracts?" he asked one morning, peeling an orange with his gloved hands. "Have you ever suffered from psychodynamic visual hallucinations?" he asked another. "Is that something you heard from Dr. X?" I said back. "Do you even know what those words mean?" My husband had always called his employer Dr. X, and I had joined him in this practice because in a marriage, few things were more powerful than shared habits. And then some years ago at the office holiday party, I learned that everyone called him Dr. X. Shorthand for a name, the doctor told me. He had grown tired of people mispronouncing. "I don't understand what the big commotion is all about," I said to my husband in our kitchen. "I saw what I saw, and I saw a boy in that tree." My husband had never been the kind of person who demanded that everyone agree with his version of things, but perhaps he was turning into one. I told myself that he had been terribly unsettled by his father's death, that grief, especially when it was not properly tended, could even turn even a reasonable human being hostile and confused. Maybe he needed to make an appointment with Dr. X for himself instead of taking down the appointments of others. Surely there was an employee discount. I read up on double exposure and grief. I read up on spirit photography. I tried to understand why my husband would not or could not see the boy in the tree even after I had made his presence known. Had his not seeing been a charade or some kind of test? From the library, I checked out chronicles of the photographs of spiritual beings and phenomena invisible to the material eye. Yet nothing provided an explanation as satisfying as the one I knew to be true the moment I saw the photograph. My husband had done something to that boy in the tree.
So good. Thank you, Laura. Show some love for Laura in the comments, please. That was amazing. Thank you. Yeah, there's so one of many very eerie and creepy stories in Laura's forthcoming collection, which I'm putting a link for here. I Hold a Wolf by the Ears. You can pre-order a copy now from Greenlight, and it'll get to you when it comes out in July 27th, something like that, towards the end of July. I'm putting Laura's Twitter handle here too, if I can learn how to copy and paste. There we go. Cool. And you can find her on Twitter. I want to get let the audience have an opportunity to ask you guys just a few questions. We have just a little bit of time, but I'm just going to jump the list and start. I was struck. I mean, all three of you, I just think, are such powerful readers, and I was wondering, when you're writing at some point in your process, do you write by ear? Is reading aloud a part at all of your process, or is it something that's totally internal and just between you and the page? That's open to whoever wants it.
I'll start. As I've gotten older and weirder and freer, I used to sort of have a phase where I would finish a draft of something and then there would come like a certain point where I would read it aloud, and that would be like that stage, because there are things you definitely catch by ear that you don't when you're just looking. But now I basically whisper what I'm writing and what I'm about to write to myself the entire time that I'm writing. Like, I'm basically always muttering when I'm writing.
So writing as a form of talking to oneself.
I mean, I think it's thinking, right? It sort of like helps me unravel it, and feel how things are. I also think that sound and sort of the rhythm of it is really, really, really important to me, and so I have to actually hear it.
Yeah, well, that comes through when you're reading it. I mean, that comes through when I'm reading it on the page, but especially to hear you read it is amazing. Laura, what about you?
You know, I think for me, it depends on the point of view, but I think with first person, it is like each first person voice for me, it's like a frequency, you know, and I think a lot of those, the early drafts are spent kind of like turning the radio dial and you're like, nope, there's still static, but trying to find that sort of right frequency. And so I do think it is like an auditory thing, and I do it particularly in the first person, write by ear in that way. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with wanting to make sure each sentence is sort of super refined, or like one sentence has to be perfect before I can move on to the next sentence, because that's really not the way I work. But I do have to find the right frequency. And then when I get on that frequency, I can really like ride it through a draft.
So kind of similar to something like channeling, it sounds like.
Yeah, maybe that sounds cooler than how I described it. So yeah, let's go with channeling.
I know, I love the radio metaphor. What's interesting is I was wondering if like younger, like at some point, when will the radio tuning between?
Yeah, that's true. No, of course, right. Like my students would be like, what is that? Yeah, that's. Because good point. There's an expiration date on that metaphor, but I like channeling sounds like very powerful. So I'm into it.
Tracy, what about you?
Yeah, I sort of hear myself reading in my, or I hear the language in my mind before it comes to the page. So that's sort of like how my consciousness knows what to write, I guess. I don't know if that.
Yeah. You've got that internal kind of rhythm form, voice forming. Yeah. That's cool. How about you guys out in the audience there? You got the chat is available to you. If you've got any questions for the authors, now would be a great time to share them, and authors as well. If you guys have questions for one another, you feel free. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you all about your dogs, which I love seeing pictures of your dogs on Instagram. Okay, I've got so audience, if you've got a question that comes to you, throw it out there. Otherwise, I want to talk about the book covers, but actually I have the question maybe before we look, since Melissa's book cover, well, I guess there is a book cover for A Girlhood, but I was curious to know about, before I asked Tracy and Laura about the book covers, can you tell us a little bit about the illustrations, Melissa? Because that's like, I didn't realize there's going to be illustrations in the collection. Can you tell us about what that is like, putting that together?
Oh yeah, sure. It's really cool. They're not by me. They're by a really amazing artist named Forsyth Harmon. I'll write her name in the chat so you can Google her and go follow her on social media or whatever. But she approached me because she had read my work, and we talked about collaborating, and we worked together on an essay that now actually is in Girlhood. But the original illustrations in the essay were published in Tin House, and we had so much fun. Sort of, basically, I would write and send her a draft, and she would come up with something and have some ideas, and we would talk about it and sort of like pass the drawings back and forth with the writing. And we had such a good time that Girlhood was already sold and under contract, and I thought it was the longest shot. And I just went to my editor and was like, what do you think about this? And she was like, I love it. So we started working together, and I'll pull one up on my phone, but they're inspired by William Morris's sort of arts and crafts work. And so like, think Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, where they're like, they have little bits of text and these like kind of ornate borders, and use lots of symbols from the essays. And so there's one sort of like plate for each of the 7, I think, essays in the collection, which is really exciting. I've never collaborated with anybody, and I've always been terrified by it, but it was a really, really great experience.
That is so cool. And I know those the illustrations you're talking about from Intrusions, right?
Yeah, here's my favorite one. Let me see if this will work. Oh, wait, I have to get you.
There you go.
Can you see it? It says, I was an animal, and it has a little hyena.
That is super cool. That's amazing. Well, I'm even more excited now. Tracy, do you want to tell us a little bit about your book cover? It's so striking, the geometry of it.
Yeah. Am I on? Oh, I'm on. Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I really love the cover. Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, I was very lucky because I got to sort of have a back and forth about the cover, which writers don't always get to do or really like exert any agency over. So I was first shown 2 covers. And so one was similar to the one that I have now with the triangles, and another had these like circle things. And I preferred the triangles. But at the time, the cover was pink, and it was lovely and absolutely beautiful. You know, the book is really driven by a sort of low-key paranoia, a sort of like, you know, quiet pulse of anxiety. And I didn't really feel that the pink was capturing that. So we went back and forth about the colors several times. I was a little bit of, I was a little persnickety about it, you know, and this is what we landed on. So I feel so lucky because I really love where it landed. Yeah.
It's so cool. I mean, I could kind of, I guess, maybe understand because there's a romance in the book and relationships and all that. But yeah, like war and paranoia, it seems, yeah, it's cool. I'm glad you stuck by your guns.
Thank you.
Laura, what about this? This is such an evocative cover.
So that cover was designed by Na Kim, who's a really amazing book designer. And for all of my other book covers, it's definitely like a process, like just like what Tracy was describing, where there was a lot of back and forth in different incarnations or different versions of possible covers. But this one was, I think, actually like the easiest cover process that I've been through, which it was the first cover that Na did. And I remember, but it was also like, so for me, a very unexpected cover, where I got the email from my editor and I was so excited to see a possible cover. And I like sort of like almost like I was like so startled by it that I like dropped my phone. And in fact, yeah, my screen is still shattered actually from dropped my phone on concrete. Because it is, I mean, it is it's like a little weird and a little out there. But we loved it. Like everyone, everyone like was really, really into it. One thing that I love about, I mean, we were definitely going for like a Black Mirror kind of vibe. The stories are kind of like unconventional ghost stories. So we were thinking of like something in the sort of like Stranger Things, Black Mirror kind of family, to evoke that like supernatural aura. But I also really liked that it spoke sort of directly to the work and to the title, but not in a way that was too literal. So we have, instead of like a wolf, which would be the obvious thing, we have this like demon sheep on the front, and it's so there were some sort of like minor tweaks, like making it like a little bit more fluorescent than the original version and things like that. But I was sort of I was like, it's so weird, but I think if you look at the cover and you're like, yes, I am into the, like, bring me the demon sheep, then like probably like the stories might be your thing. So I feel like it's an accurate cover in that way.
Bring me the demon sheep. I love it. Here, I'll make sure that everyone can see this, because I think the other thing I love about it is the way in which, for me, it's also, like many of these stories, has these layers to it, in that it looks both like the demon sheep is maybe about to get run over by a train, or maybe about to like ascend into heaven. I really, really dig it. Cool. I got a question here. So there's a lot of authors in the room, and one really amazing writer, Miranda Beverly Whittemore. Hi, Miranda. Miranda asks, she was wondering how your writing is going for each of you right now, or is there writing going on for each of you right now? Who wants that?
I'll go. Yeah. So I it was mentioned earlier, I just published an essay today that I wrote during the quarantine. And it was very much driven by the experience itself of being home during the pandemic. And my initial impression that somehow I was going to gain clarity about a big question in my life that had been sort of hounding me for a long time. And that was also sort of made in a way like more foregrounded in my mind by the pandemic. So what had happened essentially was that it sort of occurred to me early on when this was happening, that my birth mother might be dead in South Korea. So, I really actually ended up having this experience of this essay like spilling out of me, or it felt that way. But I don't write every day, but I don't, that's also not like my general practice. I write when I want to, and if I don't want to write, then I don't.
And that's a beautiful essay. I don't have the link handy, but I will share it online tomorrow. So if you're following the series or whatever, I'll make sure it gets up there. It's awesome. Melissa, what about you? Are you writing these days?
I am writing. It took me a little while because at the beginning of sheltering in place, I was finishing my book edits, and that was like the perfect work to be doing because it didn't require that I really engage with my own mind very much, except in a very technical way. I was like moving, give me a to-do list, and I'm very industrious, especially if somebody else made the list. And it was mostly little technical stuff. So that was great to be absorbed in for a while. And then when that was done and I handed the book in, I don't know. It's like I never have a lack of things to write about. I have lists and notes everywhere of things that I want to write. But, and I was struck by this just general feeling of like despair and nihilism that was shared by most of the other writers I was talking to, where I was just like, who cares? Who cares? Who cares? Every time I thought about an idea that had excited me before. And I don't know. And then that sort of passed. And what came back to me was, just sort of like my great breadth of knowledge in the ways that writing has been a refuge for me. And so I just picked the thing that didn't seem totally hopeless and started working on it, and like got really deeply invested really quickly, because that's how I deal with things, So I've actually been working on a new essay, and that's been pretty engrossing, thank God. But it took a little while.
And Lara, what about you? I think you are. Is that right? If I remember, you mentioned this online, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of like Melissa, it definitely took some time. I was in the earlier stages of working on like a new long form project before the pandemic, and I think I felt very stopped by the world for a lot of reasons. I mean, just like exhaustion, despair, nihilism, a pervasive sense of hopelessness, insomnia, and also, frankly, like they're just in my own life, like there were more pressing things to attend to that really needed to take precedence over my creative work. So. But when things kind of like settled and I was able to get into a rhythm in shelter in place, I did start writing again. I mean, I think the thing that sort of with this project in particular, it's like, but I think it would be true with any kind of like larger project. It's just, I can't help but think that what is happening right now will change this work in ways that I don't yet understand, and not that it will change it in that like halfway through, a pandemic is going to be written into it, but rather it somehow will this period, this like incredibly devastating and important period of time will like leave its mark on the work. And I don't yet know what that will look like. And so I think I was sort of feeling like, is that information that I need to have as a writer before I move forward? And then, I started to sort of think about it as like, no, like it can, just try and do it sort of in simultaneity, where you are experiencing it, processing it, writing it, et cetera. I don't mean the pandemic. I mean the project that I had started pre-pandemic. So that's kind of where I've landed, at least for the time being. But I think for me, like, it's so anchoring to have a project. And I'm okay with the work coming out like very, very slowly. I do write most days of the week, but I write like a very little. I mean, it might be, 300 words or 500 words or something like that. But I think this sort of the rhythm, the anchor, the like pattern of you return. I think especially when life is chaotic, it just feels like it's like a rope in like a stormy sea. Yeah, so I'm back there in some capacity.
Thank you. I love that, the rope in the stormy sea. One final question, and this one comes from novelist Sari Wilson. Hi, Sari. Sari says, I'm always interested in how you work with structure and form. Do you outline or do you find your way another way? Who'd like to jump on this one first?
I'll start with this one because I am a huge outliner. I'm a very visual thinker and learner. It's partly why I'm a writer, I think, because I just have to externalize what's going on. There's not enough room in here for me to unfold anything meaningful. And so I almost always have an outline. And the way I've used it has changed a lot over time, depending on the project. Some of them don't yield to the most sort of transparent kind of outlining you can think of. With Abandon Me, I had to like build mobiles and maps, and it was much craftier than usually. But like right now with this essay I'm working on, what I tend to do is I have like 10 documents for every essay, and it'll be like notes from articles and lists of ideas and research priorities and all of that stuff. But I'll have sort of a central document that begins as an outline, sort of a list of notes of things that are going to happen, meaning ideas, scenes, however the essay is going to progress. And then those sort of grow into little clumps of notes. And the whole time at the end of every writing day, I sort of check back in with it structurally and move stuff around and use the new information I gathered working that day and add things and update it and delete stuff. And then those clumps of notes basically become sort of paragraphs and scenes in the essay. So my outline sort of morphs into the actual essay. It's part of how I keep myself from being a perfectionist about sentences. And they used to be separate documents, but weirdly, that's just what happens now. So it looks crazy. Like it looks like nonsense for a long time. And I'm just at the space now where I'm like going back and starting at the beginning and turning those clumps of notes and ideas into actual writing. I hope that makes sense.
That's wild. Are you a Virgo?
No, I'm a Libra.
A Libra. Interesting. It sounds so Virgo-like to me.
I know. I'm very close to the Virgo cusp, so there is that.
I also love just thinking of the visualization of the data in different ways. I've been looking with my son a lot at the Times has been doing all this really cool data visualization graphing and such, and thinking a lot about, right, not just outlines, but how can one use three-dimensional ways or time-based ways to organize data, and what might that then open up in terms of organization for an essay or for a narrative. Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
It's totally necessary for me. Yeah.
Very cool. Tracy, what about you?
Yeah, I don't outline.
You just feel it out as you go along?
I mean, I have a trajectory that I have in mind, but I don't outline. One thing that I did do for this book, because I was keeping track of a lot of historical events, like real events, is I did occasionally have to like make little timelines because I'm not very good at math, and just sort of do it for the different characters so that I could remember how old they would be at certain points. And so I did that, but yeah, I don't outline. Yeah.
I like it. Just feeling your way. I dig it. Laura, how about you?
I'm interested in thinking about this question now in the context of astrology. And so, yeah, as a Gemini, I also don't outline. And I think there's a part of me, like I love, like Melissa, I could hear you talk about your process like forever. Like to me, that is the coolest thing. And I sort of like, I want to be the writer who has that sort of very like external kind of concretized process, and yet there's this part of me that like fundamentally like it's like resists it, you know. I think, I also thinking about it in terms of astrology, I mean, my approach to structure is just kind of like wildly inconsistent. You know, it really depends on the story. I mean, there's some stories that I have made sort of charts and maps and timelines for, and there's some stories that I just sort of wrote in one go. For the story that I read from tonight, the pitch, I actually, that again was like a completely different process. So like a good air sign, I'm just like all over the place. But I wrote that story, I hand wrote that story, the first draft, and I wrote it actually at a time where I was having a very difficult time writing anything. And so I made this deal with myself that I would wake up and first thing in the morning, I would handwrite for 15 minutes. Because I like was so desperate to feel like I was like making something. But also my usual ways of working were not working, as it were. And so I wrote the first draft in these like tiny handwritten chunks. And then I typed up the whole thing. And then actually what I did is I just kept retyping the story like over and over and over again. And parts of it were cut, new parts were written, parts were shifted around. And I just kept doing that until, I had a story that felt finished. And but I've never like done it exactly that way for any other story. I was thinking, I'm also bad at math, and the project that I'm working on has multiple perspectives and multiple timelines. And I need I started making all of these like very careful charts in the early phases, and I was looking at my notebook this morning and it's all like half abandoned already. So yeah, I don't know. I'm a Gemini with a Cancer rising and like an Aquarius moon. And I'm like all over the place when it comes to sort of thinking about structure and shape. But yeah, I think that there is, for all of us, no matter what our process looks like, different projects will demand different things from us. And so I think one way of thinking of it is living in like a low key state of chaos. But also another way of thinking of it is sort of like adapting to different projects as they come.
Thank you. That's a great note to end on. And also, as a Gemini, your birthday is sometime soonish. So happy birthday.
We're finally out of Taurus season. I feel like so much lighter of spirit. No disrespect to any Tauruses in the audience, but yes, Gemini season is here, I think, or nigh. It's very close.
It's nigh. It's either here or nigh. Yeah. So, well, happy birthday, belated or early, I should say, not belated. That's really cool. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much. This has been awesome. And thank you guys. Thanks to the great audience, as always, for your attention and your great questions. I am putting in here again the link for next time. Elizabeth Kadetsy is going to be here reading from her new memoir, and Lisa Olstein, a poet, and Sejal Shah, another an essayist who's written a kind of a memoir in a kind of collage of essays. It's really wonderful. So I hope you guys will come and join us for that. And I'm not even going to put up my other stuff because I think everyone here is already following me on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So again, thank you, audience. Thank you, readers. Thanks, Greenlight Bookstore and Literary Hub. This will be archived on their virtual book channel. Until next week, you guys stay safe and stay healthy and keep reading books. And yeah, cool. Thank you, guys. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, Brian. Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye. Thank you to the authors. It was awesome. What a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.